Hey everyone, Fina here from Fina Reads, and welcome to my August wrap-up and another round of bi-weekly ramblings. We have lots to cover, even though I didn't read as much in August, so I'll better get right on in so we can talk about all the good things. August was probably my worst reading month yet, but only kind of. And I'll tell you what that means in a second. But generally, I've read a total of 4 books in the month of August. One was a DNF, with a total of 1,224 pages, and that includes the few pages that I read in the book that I DNF'd. One of them was a 3-star read, one a 4-star read, and one a 5-star read. And I started 2 series and continued 1. I read books by 2 male authors, 2 female authors, so a good mix there, and then 1 more YA and 3 adult. And from a genre perspective, they have been all over the place. So I read 1 sci-fi, 1 fantasy, 1 historical fiction, and 1 thriller. So that sounds pretty low, but I read a lot anyway. So technically, those 4 books, well, with the DNF, are books I finished in August. I actually read 2 more books for the majority throughout the month of August, but I finished them in September. And I don't know how you handle that. I'm actually pretty curious, so let me know down in the comments. I count my books in the month where I finished them, not when I started them. Otherwise, if I would count the started ones, I would have ended up with 6 books, still the 1 DNF, and a lot more pages, because I read 900 pages out of the 2 other books that I ended up finishing in September. Well, one I'm still in the middle of, but I'll tell you about those more during the rambling part of this video. And then also, since I'm part of Spacefic 2, I read a couple of those books for like 10-15%. So that's also some pages that I read. So it's actually not that bad, but if you just look at the stats, you know, it's kind of my worst month yet. And just to highlight which books I actually read in August, and I've talked about those in all my prior ramblings, so you can go look at my rambling videos if you want a bit more detail about what I thought about the books. But I read A Labyrinth of Science and Sorcery, Book 2 in the Risen Kingdom series by Curtis Craddock. Then I read Mercury Shadow by P.J. Gerson. That's the first book in the Kardashev cycle. My DNF was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, and the DNF, as I explained before, was not because I didn't like the book, but because of a specific scene that happened there, and I just had to stop reading because I think it would impact my reading experience going forward. So I just decided to stop it there. And then the last book that I finished in August is Finlay Donovan is Killing It, a Mystery by L. Cosimano, and I hope I'm pronouncing this name right. But those are the 4 books that I actually read in August. Other exciting things that happened in August, a quick summary is, 1, as you might see, I finally finished the bookshelf that my husband and I built over the last weeks, really. It took us several weeks to get this done, but it's finally up. The books are finally in there, and I never want to sort my books ever again. That was a whole different ordeal. Originally, I was planning to do a quick vlog, but then I always kept forgetting to hit the record button and talk a little bit about what I'm doing right now. So, you know, pictures as it is. But it all started out with this being a rather boring closet. It was just a shelf, and I had a whole bunch of garbage in there, like probably a lot of closets look like. So we took all of this out. We took the shelf out and all that kind of stuff, where unfortunately I ended up putting a few holes into the drywall. So instead of starting to paint, I actually had to start patching drywall, which I've never done in my life before. I've never done any of this in my life before, what I have been doing over the last weekends. But the holes ended up being closed at the end of the day. That was all that mattered. And then I patched the whole thing and kind of sanded it down rather poorly. It looked pretty terrible afterwards. But it was fine, since I knew there is going to be a bookshelf in front of it. So I didn't worry too much about that. Then I had to pick a color. And that was pretty tricky. I don't know if you've ever been at a Lowe's or Home Depot or any other types of stores where you buy paint. The samples they have there are ridiculous. So I was sitting there looking at all the different blue-gray tones. I was like, oh my goodness, how am I supposed to pick one? And since I didn't want to annoy my husband too much with standing there for 3 hours and going back and forth on blue colors, I made a really quick decision and picked a really beautiful blue that ended up looking amazing. So I painted that whole thing twice, and then we had to stain all the wood that we bought. Then I spent an afternoon or a weekend sanding all of these shelves and the wood panels and whatnot, and then staining them. And then came the really interesting part, because we had to, as you can see, they are pipes. They're like industry type pipes, although you buy them on Amazon for the purpose of being a shelf. So they're clean and everything. But we had to figure out how to get that into the wall and get the shelves in there. And, you know, there was a lot of strategic thinking involved. But we ended up getting that done. And it lasted. And it looked good. And it was solid, and it's in the wall and not going anywhere, and you have no idea how excited about that I am, because drywall, I'm sorry, sucks. And then my husband had an amazing idea. I was done at that point, but he said, you know what? You should add some light there, like, you know, LEDs around the shelves or something. So we ended up testing that and liking it a lot. So we spent another weekend putting LED lights behind the shelves, and now I have an indirect light source in my room as well that looks amazing. And the interesting part is about the LED lights. I can see if I can show you that in the background. I don't know how good the system picks it up, but you have natural light like this, or you can change the color. So you can make it kind of a blue tone or green tone, or, you know, for Christmas, I can even have it blinking in red and green or in red and white and whatnot. So it's actually really, really cool. And I really like how it turned out, and that he came up with the idea to put that in there. And then I had the bookshelf. So then I had to get a reading chair with it, and I have an ottoman with it. And yeah, I'm just happy about it. I'm just happy. So this is also going to be my new video area, essentially. So this is where I'm going to sit in my videos now going forward. So that happened mostly in August. I mean, we started with that in July, but yeah, it happened mostly in August, and I'm really excited that it all turned out that way. Whew, that was a lot longer than I thought it would take. Okay, other things that happened in the month of August. I was a guest at Chaz and Friends over in Bookish Chaz channel, and we just talked for 2 hours about books, about Sandman, about the new Lord of the Rings TV show. We had a great conversation, and I hope Chaz decides to invite me again eventually, because it was a lot of fun talking with him about books. Another thing that happened in early August, if you haven't seen it yet, we did round 2 of the Sisterhood of the Traveling Book Box. This time it was focused on sci-fi and fantasy, and there were some really fun books in the box that, you know, changed hands and moved from one household to another. And I ended up with 11 amazing books here. So go check out that whole video series if you haven't yet. Another intro that happened in August was the Space Fake or SPSFC number 2 announcement and first kind of reading sprint that we did. During that video, we explained a little bit how Spacefig works and what we're doing, a little bit about the team that I'm part of and some of the other team members that joined me during that reading sprint. And then we actually read a couple of books, well, reading sprint. So that was really fun. And there's another one coming up on September 11th. That is, by the time I'm recording this, not scheduled yet, but just check on my YouTube channel. I will schedule it in the next days. And lastly, another thing that I put out just recently is the announcement for the Stephen King readathon that is happening in October, organized by Jake, the bookish drummer, and Andrew, Jake, and I are all moderators of different teams in the Stephen King read-along, and you can pick which team you want to join. So yes, go check that out, and then join Team Anywilkus because that's mine. I haven't rambled enough yet, and that's why we're getting into the rambly part now. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the 2 books that I read over the last 2 weeks, and that technically I've read mostly in August. So, you know, part of August wrap-up is wrapping up, talking a little bit more detail about the books that I've read during this month. And the one that I then finished early in September was Winterlight by Kristen Britton, which is book 7 and the currently last book in the Green Rider series. We are all waiting for book 8 to come out. One thing that makes me a little bit sad is this means this is the end of the read-along. There are still a few people reading book 6 and book 7. I have to say though, I'm a bit salty about Winterlight now. I read that one last year as an arc when it came, because book 7 was released last year, and I read it within 2 days. So it was a really quick read through because I was so hyped for this book. It was my most anticipated release last year. So I read it within 2 days, and I already was kind of, that was really fast paced, and there was a lot of stuff going on and a lot of side stories that, I don't know, didn't seem to go anywhere. They were resolved really, really fast. And then other new side stories that were introduced that weren't resolved in book 7 that were so big though that I'm now wondering, okay, what happens in book 8? Like, there's still so many open storylines from all the other books, and now you added a bunch more of them, and we only have one more book in this series, allegedly. I really hope it's just one more book, because this thing needs to end now. We're good. Like, I love this series, but certain storylines just have to have a resolution now. I cannot deal with it anymore. So this was then my second read through of Winterlight, and yeah, it definitely is not up to par with some of the other books, and I'm really thinking Winterlight is, if not my least favorite, at least my second least favorite book in this series at the moment. Still good, don't get me wrong. There was a lot of stuff that I really loved, a lot of the stories that move forward in a really satisfying manner, but again, it was more the nature of it being so fast-paced and so many things being resolved so quickly. I would much rather have gotten rid of them all and then spend more time on some of the more important scenes, because they were all handled really quickly as well, and that was a bit sad. You know, quick summary of where my head's at on that one. So, and the other one that I started in July that I'm still in the middle of, I'm still not 100% done, is Jade City by Fonda Lee, which is book 1 in the, I don't even know what the series is called. Oh, the Greenbone Saga. There you go. And that was one of the books that Ian also picked for me to read last month. Well, I started, you know, I'm finishing it soon. I think he is behind with the books I picked for him as well. So, you know, at least we're doing both the same. Jade City is definitely interesting. There are some really interesting characters in there. I definitely like the one female main character that is part of that book. She has an interesting story so far. I just read about a big change here, so I'm curious to see how that continues for her. I'm not over the moon with the book though, and the reason is I'm not sure what it wants to be. So it's more an urban fantasy, kind of Godfather type Japanese mafia story. And I mean, this is a pretty known book, so you probably know generally what it is about, even if you haven't read it quite yet. And I'm okay with that. I like urban fantasy, but it is kind of a weird mix. Like, the writing style and the storytelling style is kind of a weird mix of it being epic fantasy, but without the depth and still having those urban fantasy elements. So what bugs me about it is not epic fantasy, because it does not have that big epicness and denseness that an epic fantasy story has, but urban fantasy is usually a bit lighter and fluffier and more fast-paced than this book is. So it's kind of weirdly in between, and I'm wondering, like, for me, it's like, figure yourself out, please. What are you? So that my head can kind of align with it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's where I'm at. Anyway, I still like it. I like it enough that I ordered book 2 already to see how it continues. But as I said, I have about 150 pages left in the first book, and then we'll just go from there. It's just, you know, I read it a little bit every now and then, and it's a bit slower read for me, but that's okay. And I think that's enough. Even though I didn't read much, I had a lot to say about the things that I read. And that's okay too, you know. Sometimes you don't need to read 15 books a month. Sometimes 4 are more than enough. Well, 4.5, kind of 5.5. I don't know how you count that. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, really. If you stayed that long, thank you so much for listening to my rambles. I hope you enjoyed the video, and let me know how your August went. What was your favorite book that you read in the month of August, and what are you excited about in September? And with that, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope I see you soon. Bye!